Fire Emblem has been making a name for itself out west ever since the miracle debut of Awakening. Turns out, actually marketing a game will make it sell better, along with shoving in a waifu and husbando dating sim. The appealing combination of strategic gameplay and engaging story finally latched on to thousands of fans as the series became a new pillar franchise for Nintendo. Years later, Fire Emblem has finally made its return to home console, despite a failed attempt more than 10 years ago with Atelius games. Poor Ike. He deserves better than that. But now with the power of Switch and marketing by its side, Fire Emblem looks to be in good hands on home console. As long as it doesn't suck. Going into Three Houses, I had my doubts. Would I be able to connect to the student cast? Would the story deliver on the mystery it was building? Is this the right direction for Fire Emblem? Would I find the perfect waifu? Well, I believe all those questions have been answered, whether I like it or not. Before I go into this review, know there won't be any spoilers beyond what Nintendo has already shown in pre-release trailers. It's been a couple months since the original release, but I understand there are those who still have not played it. As such, I will keep this spoiler free. But I know some of you will complain anyway.
You know us too well.
That said, I want to do a spoiler-filled video after I finish all the routes, just so I could effectively process the plot.
Wait, you haven't beaten the game already? It's been like 2 months!
I wasn't kidding when I said I was slow. With that out of the way, let us begin.
Fódlan, and these three mighty powers now exist in relative harmony.
Three Houses reimagines the classic Three Kingdoms legend with a Fire Emblem twist. I mean, the map of Fódlan is literally a Three Kingdoms map flipped upside down. Not exactly hiding that inspiration now, are they?
It's the only thing Koei Tecmo knows how to do.
But besides the obvious reference, Fódlan and the surrounding nations are rich in lore and history, tainted with the blood of war. This rich backstory alone persuades you to progress through the incredibly long campaign. As you explore the monastery, finish paralogs, build stronger bonds, and progress through the main plot, you chip away at the mysterious world, slowly comprehending its complicated history. I'm amazed how real Fódlan as a continent feels. Each kingdom has a reason for forming, instead of just existing for the sake of the plot. Without taking the time to make these discoveries, the world can seem a bit pointless. So learning all there is through support conversations and other activities is a worthwhile adventure. My favorite lore building segment would have to be the relationship between Duskur and Fargus. It's certainly not the most important backstory in the game, but arguably the most impactful. A lot of what occurs between the two countries directly affects the students, specifically the Blue Lions. If you were to bypass talking to students in the monastery or skip the support conversations, you would miss some of those nuances of that story. And that's just one of the bigger side stories. There are a surprising amount of history-based backstories in Three Houses, and it's a treat to uncover new details as you progress. However, Three Houses doesn't reveal everything to you at once, despite its occasional info dumps during the main story. You could easily miss an important piece of the Fódlan puzzle if you don't take your time, for better or for worse. If I had one small gripe, it would be the cryptic nature of the world building. I'm all for mystery and slowly learning the truth, but by the time I complete the game, I don't want to be left wondering what the whole truth is. I know, not every question needs to be answered, but a well thought out story should have more answers than questions by the end. To me, it's obvious they have all the answers prepared. However, the writers, for whatever reason, choose to hide them. That said, there is no denying the passion and care that went into building this world, even despite its layered storytelling. The lore in Three Houses is fantastical, intriguing, and entertaining.
What could have brought you here?
I just turned on the game and I had high hopes for Three Houses' main campaign. Even after learning about the different routes you could take, I figured the story would end well enough for each, tying together an epic tale of tragedy and hope. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Each path's story is enjoyable, but some paths fail to leave a big enough impact compared to the delightfully entertaining end of Part 1. For reference, I ended up siding with the Black Eagles in my first playthrough, a choice I somewhat regret after playing through other paths. Not to say it's a bad route, but I recommend siding with the Blue Lions or Golden Deer first. The actions in Part 2 for those two houses are much more understandable and entertaining than the somewhat underdeveloped Black Eagle's path. That said, Part 1 is fantastic towards the end, no matter which house you choose. While the beginning chapters are a little slow going, It effectively builds up to a climactic final 3 chapters. My jaw hit the floor during my first playthrough, and I was heartbroken by the time it ended. I understand that most people view Part 2 as heavy spoiler territory, so I won't show gameplay from it. However, I can't do justice to this review without mentioning it. Where Part 1 is the mystery and plot builder, Part 2 should be the case-solving, satisfying finale, but that's not the case. Part 2 starts out fine, especially when you have an objective besides, I have a request. Try not to die. But the ending leaves much to be desired. That is to say, for the Black Eagle's Path. This review is mostly based on my first playthrough of the Black Eagle's Path, but I digress. The final battles are epic and challenging, at least for me, but they're either forced, nonsensical, or rushed. I want to be satisfied by what my team accomplished, not confused at why this is the final boss. Thankfully, there are enjoyable moments during the Part 2 campaign, so it's not a total loss, but I see the last half of Three Houses as a missed opportunity to create a captivating, memorable ending.
Well, if you played all the routes, you would see how amazing it is.
I agree for the most part. Three Houses is incomplete with one playthrough. If you want the entire story, you need to play multiple times, which is arguably tiresome. To Three Houses' credit, it handles the different paths better than its predecessor Fates, but that doesn't mean it's perfected the style. It's clear to me that some paths have more effort put into it than others, story-wise. I know asking the writers to make each route unique and equally engaging is a nigh impossible task, but surely they could have done a better job. I shouldn't finish the game thinking,
Well, that was pointless.
but that's how I felt after beating the Black Eagle route. Maybe that's an analogy for life.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Wow, can't believe you hate the story that much. Unsubscribe.
Classic YouTuber joke.
Don't get me wrong, I still find Part 1 engaging and enjoyable, some of the best writing on the Switch. But Part 2 fails to equally deliver on what Part 1 set up, at least on the Black Eagle side. Overall, the story is good in Three Houses, and depending on the route you choose, it can be great or mediocre by the end. However, the one consistency through all the paths that make the overall story and presentation enjoyable are the units themselves. Ah, that's sweet.
No.
The cast of Fire Emblem was one of the series' strongest selling points coming to Three Houses. Each unit had unique personalities and designs that set them apart from the average NPC. They also shared relationships with other units, as explored in paralogs and support conversations. You knew them by name, raised them up, and grew to love their quirks.
Well, maybe not all of them.
Heck, they even made a mobile game based on these characters, which, by the way, has grossed more than $500 million. Unfortunately, the large, diverse cast also introduced a flaw in the Fire Emblem series: the benchwarmers. Not all units received the same amount of love. There were some units who either got replaced with a better unit, were too weak when recruited, or never got the chance to shine in any sort of plot. With Three Houses, however, Intelligent Systems finally addresses that flaw. No character in Three Houses is unimportant to the overall story being told. Sure, some might have a bigger role to play.
Edelgard, Dimitri, Claude, and the entire Blue Alliance house.
Seriously, these guys get so much love. But no one is left behind. That's mostly in thanks to the Monastery hub world and the fantastic support conversations. At the Monastery, you can talk to your units and hear the opinions about the current events. If you take the time to talk to everyone, you'll learn tidbits about these characters that you otherwise wouldn't see, like Flame's hunger for fish.
Her hunger will never be quenched.
By interacting with your party at the Monastery, you grow closer to your units than ever before. It's not quality content every time your students open their mouths, but 7 times out of 10 you'll get something insightful. The same can be said for support conversations, which are the best in series history. Not every conversation will blow your mind, but most of them contain depth and insight into the personalities and backstories of your units that you can't find elsewhere. Intelligent Systems even went as far as to hide story elements in support conversations, meaning if you want the entire story, you have to complete the support conversations. To be honest, I enjoyed this new wave storytelling. Not only were they fun to listen to, it gave them more meaning. Going into the cast, if you want to know more about the individual students, I encourage you to go watch my Finding the Right House for You video. Since I released it before actually playing the game, it's not 100% accurate, but I got most things close. However, I do want to highlight a handful of my favorites.
Ferdinand!
Ferdinand for me was a great unit. He has the movement, the range, the tankiness, and just enough attack to kill most anything. As a paladin, he unlocks the combat arc Swift Strikes, a move that lets you strike twice in one go. Oh, did he slaughter so many poor souls, all while shouting his name, "I am Ferdinand von Eyre."
Did you know? Ferdinand is actually a noble from the Dresden Empire. He's the son of the Prime Minister. Did you know that? It's a really easy detail to miss.
I am Ferdinand.
Shut up, Ferdinand! Honestly, going into my first run, I thought Ferdinand would be overbearing and annoying, never shutting up about nobility. I mean, he didn't ever shut up about nobility, but through listening to his supports, I discovered the man behind the mane. Also, move over, Sylvain, cause there's a new lady killer in town. Ingrid. Ingrid was the first unit I recruited to the Black Eagle's house. I thought she was really pretty. She always had this knightly air about her, ever focused on her goal to become a knight. But then I learned that there's more to her than breaking gender roles. She has a meaningful reason for becoming a knight. As I learned more about her, I grew to love her as a person, not just another Pegasus knight.
Dude, she's not real.
That's not what I meant! Her problems, motivations, and personality are believable, relatable. Almost as if you could find someone like that in real life. Maybe.
Whatever, weirdo.
Of course, it helped that she kicked butt 24/7 as a Pegasus Knight. I probably wouldn't be as fond of her as I am if she couldn't perform on the battlefield. Thankfully, she was one of my best units. Granted, the flying class might be a little broken, especially with the Brave Lance, but Ingrid is a dependable unit in her own right.
Kaspar.
Speaking of dependable units, Kaspar is a beast. I don't know if it's the overpowered nature of the Brawler class, but my word, Kaspar could not be stopped. The combo of gauntlets and axes allowed him to kill anything in his path in one turn. He's not so much a tank as he is an elusive martial artist. Sure, he can take a few hits, but his ability to dodge attacks is legendary. Also, he crits so much, he might as well be called Critspar. Forget I said that. Granted, he's not the most complicated character. In fact, he's as simple as they come. But that simplicity is charming and likable. How he reacts to support conversations and story situations is fun to watch. My favorite conversations of his being him and Bernadetta.
The ship is strong with this one.
Edelgard.
Edelgard, on the other hand, is not that simple. Without going into spoilers, which I could very easily, because there's so much to talk about, Edelgard's backstory makes her one of the most interesting lords in the Fire Emblem series. Her motivations are quite reasonable, leading you to understand her hatred for the Crest and society as a whole. That's not a spoiler, by the way, she literally says it during the reveal trailer. As I completed each mission, I grew closer to the arguably cold-hearted princess of the Empire, discovering that deep down, she's a dork. I relate to that, except I'm not serious at all, so I'm just pure dork. I realized liking Edelgard's character is a controversial opinion, hashtag no waifu is perfect, but all that hate is not warranted in my mind. I could go on and on how Edelgard deserves more than the hate she gets, and about that horrible S-support illustration. Good night! Who approved that? But I encourage you to form your own opinion on the matter. Or come back later for when I do my Three Houses Waifu Battle Royale. Name not final. In terms of combat, Edelgard was a fantastic armored unit and axe user for me, with enough resistance to handle a couple magic attacks. She's not the first tank female, but she's definitely my favorite in the series. Sorry, Effie.
Aww, I'm hungry.
Of course, all three lords are pretty strong in their own right, but maybe not as tanky as Edelgard, although Dimitri is a beast. Lastly, let's talk about the Avatar character Beleth. Don't make fun of my pronunciation, because that's how the Japanese pronounce it. Oh, Beleth. More so than any other game, Beleth is an empty shell for the player to inhabit as they explore Fódlan. They have a close to zero personality beyond blank expressions, allowing the player to project themselves onto the character. In a sense, Beleth's obliviousness to the world is a good way to feed information to the players. Even for an avatar, Beleth is clueless about almost everything in Fódlan, a feature that makes them less likable as a character, but easier to relate to as an avatar, if that makes sense, because the player too is clueless about the world. However, I despise avatars in Fire Emblem with a passion. Avatars add nothing to the Fire Emblem journey beyond trying to stroke the ego of the player.
Oh, you're the only one who can save us. I know you will do great things. Wow, you're pretty good looking. You're so strong.
A sparring partner like you might finally give me a challenge.
I want your fish.
I've never seen such strategy before. I'm impressed.
I wish I could be as smart as you.
That was very noble of you.
Don't ever leave me.
Oh, I wish my muscles were big as yours.
Please let me have your children.
Maybe I went a little too far with that one. But the praise does get tiresome over time. I thought having 3 lords would take the focus of the avatar this time around, but the spotlight always shines on Beleth. To be fair, some Fire Emblem fans really like that. I dislike it. I'd rather have a set main character like Alm, Celica, Ike, Micaiah, Lynn, who aren't thoroughly perfect, but still inspiring and likable. They make mistakes, but that's human. It's human to make mistakes. In that sense, they are way more relatable. And they have a personality. They're not like a plank of wood. A blank slate like Beleth doesn't scratch that itch. As I've said in a previous video, I don't want to be in this game. I suck. Of course, since Beleth is the never do anything wrong avatar, they must be incredibly OP. Not boring to play as, but quite broken towards endgame. Still, there were some tight battles at the end, even with Beleth on the field. So in that sense, I appreciated having Beleth there to overcome the challenge. Overall, the characters in Three Houses are tremendous, some of the best in the series, besides Beleth. I can recommend playing Three Houses for the cast alone, but thankfully there is still a whole lot more to love. Fire Emblem gameplay is as addicting as ever in Three Houses, maybe more so. My mind refused to put the controller down until I beat the main story and experienced perfect time, despite my body's desperate cries for sleep. Insomnia is not a problem if you choose not to sleep. Each battle is like solving a chess-based puzzle. You have to strategically pick and place your units before the battle begins to take full advantage of the enemy's weaknesses. But in typical Fire Emblem fashion, surprise enemy reinforcements appear as you progress through the map, prompting you to think on your toes and execute a plan of action flawlessly. We do! Like I said, flawlessly. However, unlike most titles in the series, Three Houses places less emphasis on the weapon triangle and more on combat arts and abilities. Your units aren't strong or weak based on the stick they hold, it's based on their talents and abilities. How you raise your students based on their strengths and your preferences affects the unit they become as well as enemies they can fight. Granted, bows are still effective against flyers, magic wrecks armor, and mages still have about as much defense as an Abra. Pokemon humor. But details like that help balance classes from being completely broken. Could you imagine a Lysithea with the physical defense of Dedu? Although I'm not against having a war cleric class. Bring it back, IS! Surprisingly, I rarely grew tired of the school system. In fact, it added a much needed breather from some intense battles. I eagerly watched the growth of my units, pruning them into my ideal team. I felt a great sense of accomplishment when my units gained a new skill level or earned a new proficiency. Plus, I enjoyed making everybody happy. This must be the joy of teaching! Thank goodness there isn't a parent-teacher conference. Another new feature in Three Houses are the battalions. While they provide some stat bonuses to your unit, battalions are most useful for the Gambit, a special move available once or twice a mission. Gambits are never essential to beating the game, but they pulled me out of some tight situations. It helps to have a trump card in case events turn sour. But Gambits are especially useful against giant monsters, a new enemy type. Basically, these are giant damage sponges with shields. I enjoyed the challenge monsters brought, and it was refreshing to fight a new type of enemy. Of course, they don't go down easy. While you can break them through normal means, Gambits guarantee a shield break, plus damage. They were crucial for my playthrough, as I had maps swarming with monsters at some points. The combination of Gambits and monsters is a fun addition to traditional Fire Emblem combat. But besides that, battalions are essentially worthless. Although, they do add to the atmosphere. With so many soldiers on the battlefield, it's like you're in the middle of an epic battle, instead of just 10 people fighting 20 or so bad guys. Moving on, Three Houses story-based missions are the most exhilarating aspect of the game. From the unique scenarios to the incredible music, it was always a treat to see the impossible odds placed before you at the beginning of the battle. You want me to kill all these people? Nonsense. There's more on the way. It can be a little daunting at times, but once you get into the battle, you become completely engrossed. Oftentimes, there will be high-intensity moments as if I was walking on thin ice. One misstep and the entire mission would be ruined. You take your time, planning carefully your next 4 moves as well as your opponents. Next thing you know, you've beaten the boss and cleared 2 hours of your life. Hooray for suffering less! To be fair, some of the better heart-pounding missions don't happen until towards the end of the first part and into the second part, but even the less impactful story moments will have you holding your breath, hoping that Caspar can dodge 5 hits in 1 turn. Redo!
That's what I like to call a pro gamer move.
In my mind, that's all thanks to the incredible game design. The placement of enemies within each map is evidence of Intelligent Systems' deep understanding of how the player will move and respond to the obstacles placed before them. While this might be true for most Fire Emblem games, when you consider the size of 3 houses, that meticulous game design becomes even more impressive. The amount of thought and care that is placed into these missions is mind-blowing. Of course, story missions have much more going for them than the auxiliary and quest battles. Admittedly, it's hard to make grinding missions appealing, although what are paralog missions if not sexy quest battles? Still, the grinding battles are fun, at least for me. That's mostly due to how great the strategic combat is. In past games, grinding missions were mainly just fights with zombies who only knew how to bite. But Intelligent Systems finally realized that you don't need numerous hordes of zombies to grind. We're perfectly fine with killing hordes of bandit nobodies. No name means no shame. However, these grinding levels have little variety in terms of map terrain. I became overwhelmingly annoyed with how often certain maps were reused.
I swear, if I see this map one more time!
With the amount of side missions 3 Houses provides, I expected to have more than 10 or so maps to play on. The lack of variety also affects immersion. It doesn't help that one paralog battle that's supposed to take place on one side of Fódlan uses the same exact map as a paralog that takes place on the opposite side of the continent. Thankfully, the gameplay is so fun, it allows me to forget that this is probably the 50th time I played on this map. Difficulty also might be an issue for some. Unless you feel completely inadequate, avoid normal mode at all cost. You will be bored. Hard mode is the way to go, even for someone like me who finds games difficult most of the time. For some reason, Intelligent Systems avoided including a true difficulty mode at launch and made the usually normal mode the hard mode. If someone like me can beat the game in hard mode, it's probably on the easy side.
Although some chapters had me sweating bullets.
Maybe they didn't want to scare new players away? Well, either way, they have added a hard mode called maddening mode since then, which should scratch the difficulty itch for most. Personally, I recommend starting with hard mode, even for a beginner, but that's your choice. Cutscenes in Fire Emblem traditionally don't happen very often. The series is more like a visual novel in that sense. Recently, however, Intelligent Systems has been trying to include more animated cutscenes to add more flair and pizzazz to the story. Unfortunately, the team that got to animate 3 Houses laid a giant egg of mediocrity. I understand the more cutscenes you have, the lower the quality you produce, at least what I assume is a low budget for Fire Emblem. But some of these cutscenes are unacceptable. The pauses are awkward, the movements choppy, and the style ugly. Cutscenes from the 3DS games should not be light years ahead of the Switch. Please, Nintendo, give Fire Emblem team a bigger budget. Please? Although, perhaps the lackluster cutscenes are a reflection of the graphical fidelity of 3 Houses as a whole. The textures are laughable for a 2019 game. I understand game developers cut corners where possible, but using a still image for fruit? Is that really necessary? Is the beauty of fruit impossible to recreate in the 3D environment? Okay, it's not a game breaker. Pictures of fruit doesn't ruin my enjoyment. But seeing awful textures during important story scenes and support conversations is ridiculous. I think Koei Tecmo is the one to blame, as they are notorious for pumping out warrior games like this. But it could have been a conscious decision by Intelligent Systems. And to be fair, this is the Fire Emblem team's first home console game since Radiant Dawn. While the environments and building textures are far from perfect, it's a step up from the 3DS, at the very least. I appreciate that effort. The music, on the other hand,
is brilliant. Some of the best tracks in the series.
You know the music is good when the preparation phase of each battle has me like, the main theme is fantastic, and they frequently bring it back for remixes or to expand upon it. However, like Fate's main theme,
I think Three Houses uses a theme a little too often. Not annoyingly so, but it would have been nice to break away from it a bit more. Of course, I still enjoy it and plan on listening to the OST for a long time.
Blue Sky in a Battle is my jam!
I've been waiting for Three Houses, like many of you, for a long time. In a lot of ways, it delivered on the hype. The wait was worth it. But in some ways, it let me down. In the end, I loved playing through Three Houses and learning about the lore-rich world of Fódlan and its inhabitants. It may not have a satisfying ending in some paths, but the journey is well worth the effort. If you're new to the series, this is the perfect place to start. I guarantee you'll adore the cast and enjoy the battles immensely. If you're already a fan of the series, thank you for watching all the way through despite you already playing it. Because if you're a Fire Emblem fan, let's face it, you're gonna play it anyway. Three Houses is a successful return to home console for the series, while also taking important steps forward. It is exhilarating, exciting, touching, relatable, and one of the best games on the Switch. I'm excited to see where Intelligent Systems takes the series next. Oh, after DLC, I guess.
So, why is this video called Fódlan Rhapsody? Clickbait much?
Have you ever tried reading the lyrics of Bohemian Rhapsody? It's about as confusing as the plot of Three Houses.
Thank you so much for watching. What do you think about Fire Emblem Three Houses? Worth the 280 hours or so it took to beat all the routes? Let me know in the comments below.
I am so sorry it took me so long to write this. Life has been stupidly busy as well as jam-packed with games to play. I'm just glad I have something finished.
You're so slow.
Yeah, I know. If you like what you see and want to see more,
Please subscribe.
I guarantee there will be more Fire Emblem goodness to come, so please don't leave me. Also, be sure to share this review with your Fire Emblem friends. Just don't hurt me. I also have a surprise once we hit 3,000 subs, so look forward to that. Goodbye, you good people.